And gentlemen, I believe we're live today with Scott Needham. So, very exciting conversation we got lined up today, Scott, talking about scaling businesses, but not just scaling private label or scaling reselling businesses, but both, because you're a bit of an overachiever. So, welcome to the show, man. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yep, thank you. Overachiever or just spreading myself out too thin
Uh,
some.
yeah, I think everybody I know does that. I certainly do that. I wouldn't claim to be an overachiever, just good at spreading myself too thin. But there is an excitement and a buzz, and certainly a lot of quick learnings that come from different business models, right? Whether or not it's too thin, certainly it can be stressful to run, but other people will benefit. So if you're listening live with us on, I believe we're on, as long as it's all working, Facebook, including my Facebook profile and the group, the Amazing FBA group, YouTube, Twitter, and LinkedIn. So in any of those places, if you want to pop in any comments or questions, we probably won't have time to get to them live, but we'll certainly revisit afterwards, because I know that I think there's a lot of things that I would personally, if I were in your shoes, want to ask Scott. So, with no further ado, we're going to record a podcast as live. So, Scott, are you ready to talk about
Let's
uh,
do it.
scaling businesses? Let's do this thing, right?
Yeah.
Here we go. Ladles and jelly spoons, boys and girls, welcome to the 10K Collective podcast, the place to be for 6, 7, and 8-figure Amazon sellers and e-commerce sellers. But more broadly, I think entrepreneurs, there are many lessons to be learned if you think slightly outside the box. Today's guest, Scott Needham, needs very little introduction. He's owner of two very different e-commerce businesses, both of which I think are going towards a sale or an exit. So tons to talk about there, and of course the owner and creator of Smart Scout, one of the go-to softwares out there for Amazon sellers. So Scott, it's been a while coming. Fantastic to get you on the show. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah. No, thank you for having me on.
Pleasure. So today I want to talk about, we're going to do two bite-sized episodes about buying, scaling, and selling Amazon businesses. But of course, Amazon businesses can encompass so many different models, specifically sourcing models. So I know that instead of just building from scratch a private label business and then selling it, which is very difficult, challenging, and worthy of praise, but very common, you actually bought and are scaling a private label business, which is quite different. So my first question is, why would you buy and then scale? Why not just build from scratch? What was your thinking behind that?
Well, opportunity was there. So to take, the private label business that I bought a year ago was actually my cousin's business, and I saw him grow it. I flew to China with him once to meet with suppliers, so I had some familiarity with the business, saw what it took, and we did fairly well in our reselling business, Buy Boxer, and so that's where we invested in, is a private label business. And this still was during the time when we actually were competing against Thrasio on the bid, but having my cousin as the owner, that kind of was the personal connection that helped us, win. And because we offered him the fastest route out of the business. So, and because we had a lot of expertise in Amazon for, I've been selling for 7, 8 years, starting in private label, it was kind of a natural fit. And even today, actually last night, I was doing things, I was launching some very specific advertising campaigns across both business models and kind of see how they work. So, still in the same space, Amazon, just like one business model to another.
Yeah, interesting. So a couple of things that strike me. One is skill sets are very portable, even though businesses really aren't sometimes. So that makes sense. You're sort of leveraging a similar skill set, not the same, but similar across multiple sort of business models. Speed. I remember a business coach of mine saying speed stuns. There's something magic about speed, right? If somebody really wants to move, and there shows a certain seriousness if you actually buy stuff quickly. There's always that thing in the back of your mind if you're selling something, isn't there? Whatever it is, a business, a deal, a physical, product, that a person doesn't move quickly, you kind of think, yeah, are they really serious? Are they actually going to do it? And if somebody else is like, I'm in, go, here's the money, that's always really powerful, right? And the personal connection, there's no substitute for that as well. I mean, very old school business wisdom, but I like the fact that it comes up in the tech world. So tell me about the buying it as opposed to building. What are the upsides of doing it that way, would you say?
Well, so many of the tough things we didn't have to worry about. we had products that were already selling and had like hundreds of reviews. We had the sourcing in China down. The way that he had his business set up was he was speaking with multiple manufacturers, but he had a really good relationship with his sourcing agent, where her team actually groups all of the multiple manufacturers that she groups them at her warehouse. So she offers a lot of services, and then we're able to ship over containers at a time, and get a cost savings there. So a lot of the tough stuff was already there. All I had to do was focus on, Amazon related things like the marketing, how are we going to advertise? How are we going to, improve on products? Are we going to try and squeeze more margin out of certain things? So if there was actually one big change that we made, we actually just raised the prices across the board. And because 2021, everyone knows that stock was an issue. We had our own, and so we just decided we had to raise prices, and that's the way we increase the value of the business.
Yeah, very simple. By the way, the smartest people I know are doing a lot of the simplest sounding things, but to actually do it takes some courage, which is just raising your price. I mean, 100%. This seems to be the conclusion that the 10K Collective Mastermind members have been coming to. Some of them after like 2 years. I mean, and they're not stupid people. Some of them have been busy business their entire lives in retail. So it can take a while to go, actually, we really have to raise our prices because we've been trained by years of experience that it only goes one way, i.e. down. And that ain't true. I was just reading today that I think US consumer inflation is running about 5.8% year on year in November. So, that's the environment we're in, right? So wise response, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like in all parts of selling on Amazon, you have to find excuses. You have to find reasons to justify to raise your prices. Like, it's not a very easy business model to do if you're on razor thin margins. But if you have a more attractive product, say, your packaging, and like we've got really good rankings, or, even moderate rankings, if you're able to present yourself as more of a premium product, I think that, long term, you have a lot more upside. And one way that we look at it is we consider like price bands. We kind of say like, well, say you have a product that's like $21, you're selling it for 21. Well, in the eyes of the consumer, 21 and 22 and 23 are just about the same number. People aren't making, that doesn't really affect our conversion rate. But if you go over one of these, like, thresholds, like say you go from like $19, $19.95 to $21, you go over that $20 mark. And we do see bumps in conversion rates. So a lot of our increasing margins, we'll be like, well, we're at 22, might as well go up to 24 because we're not above 25. People don't see that. And we find that that's the easiest spots to raise your margins at.
Very interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. So what they call psychological pricing. That I think there's two words around that. And there's the psychological pricing thing. Like, is it that thing obsession of internet marketers ever sell something $47.47 and stuff? And I don't. I was talking yesterday. I interviewed Mark. He's the CEO of a very sophisticated repricing engine, amongst many other things, Eva.guru. And he said, yeah, the evidence isn't in so far that actually makes a difference. Whereas I think you're absolutely bang on with the price band because it's much more real. I mean, consumers aren't particularly stupid. They're used to like 21.95. They're basically thinking, yeah, it's kind of 22, but they're not going to sit there and do higher maths. So yeah, I really like that. Super simple, but that's a massive hint to everyone. Okay, so what are the challenges then of obviously the upsides, by the way, of the supply chain being in place? I think it's absolutely monstrous. I mean, that's at least a year of stress out of your life, isn't it? But there have to be challenges as well, I'm guessing.
Well,
So
I mean, yeah, there's plenty of challenges. It's hard to change a business, especially it's more established. Um, so think about when you're starting a new business, it's very easy to make a change. Every little thing you do, like you see the results immediately. But the more established a business is, it takes a more effort to make a smaller difference. And that's kind of how it felt. Certainly there were, we restructured our advertising focused on different products, even launched a few new products, but some of the challenges are just running the business. And that is really the supply chain and logistics and financing certain parts. That probably took more of headaches. If you're ever going to buy a business, one cautionary tale I'd say is you're also buying their headaches. So whatever it took to run the business, we were buying into that. And I told my brother, who I partner with, I was like, hey, before we jump all in on this, understand that yes, we're buying, a profitable business, but we're also going to inherit those headaches. And the biggest reason why it wasn't too many headaches is we had operators of the business. So I really only spent about 4 or 5 hours a week on this private label business to manage it, but had an operator that was spending, a full time on it. And that allowed me to, like I said, I've done a few different business models on Amazon, and the only way that I'm able to even stay above board is putting in people to operate them. And I kind of feel a little bit the puppet master, and try and move the levers as I see them. And actually, I listen to podcasts all the time so that I am moving the right levers. And I cannot stress enough how important education is, and asking questions and just continuously learning, so you have better experiments.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So many bits of wisdom there. Yeah, what I've noticed is that certain types of businesses, particularly, for example, in supplements, they're very profitable, partly because there's a barrier to entry, but there's a barrier to entry partly because it's intrinsically kind of got a medical or legal or ethical question mark that every so often gets raised more strongly than others by the federal government. Or California seems very fond, for example, of just throwing all sorts of legislation and taxes at businesses you didn't even know could exist. So, and they're not the only one. I'm not anti-California, but there are various states. They're the one that seem to come up the most often for Brits anyway. So yeah, I take your point on the headaches, and sometimes the headaches are hidden things, aren't they? I mean,
you're totally right about California, though. We actually got wrapped into a lawsuit recently involving that. Around their Proposition 65, a product, if it has certain materials in it, you have to say hey, this may cause cancer. And we got roped in, and we've only sold a few units. So California, yeah, watch out for that one.
Yeah, Prop 65 is becoming quite infamous amongst that. I've not really heard many people talk about it, but one or two mastermind mums I've got that sell in America, and obviously amongst that, therefore in California, we've got absolutely slammed with Prop 65 stuff. And the other thing is just strange, unexpected consequences. For example, you go and get professional tax advice if you're UK based or US, whatever, and you say, okay, you should register for sales tax in certain states, and of course that's changing but state by state quite frequently, or especially in the last couple of years. And then of course what that happens is that you register for sales tax, you deal with that, and then they go, there's state corporation tax, there's Prop 65, there's this, there's that, there's 10 other compliance things. So yeah, there's a lot of stings in tails, I think, when it comes to legal side. So I'm not a lawyer, I'm just flagging this stuff up. I can't advise anyone, and I don't think you'd want to either, would you? But yeah, good reality check. So it sounds like you had gone in with the mindset that you knew about that, and you had great operations people in place. So
Yeah.
how did you actually go about? I was going to ask you about raising the money, but more excitingly, let's skip to scaling. So how much, can I ask, first of all, just give an idea of the size of the business? If you had a full-time COO or equivalent,
Yeah.
presumably it was substantial size. So can you give us a rough idea?
It's about $3 million revenue, and that's the business that we bought. And actually, we didn't grow that. Tried to, but supply chain, we had some stock issues. We had 2 products that competitors came in and really made it difficult. They just weren't the same. The category just changed. And still trying to figure out some tactics to keep ahead of the storm. The latest, just to go into it, was started some Google advertising, Google into Amazon, and seeing if that can affect our sales ranks. Let Let's see. So yeah, we didn't actually. It was very hard to grow a business this year when it seems like shipping times every single month gets a month longer. So yeah.
Yeah, that's one of those infinite recursive things, isn't it? Like if it gets a month longer every month, it basically means it never arrives, which kind of can happen, can't it? I remember a friend of mine, he sold some, he got in, he thought enough stock for 6 months. He sold out in 3 weeks or maybe even less. And there was out of stock for 9 months. I mean, and that was in earlyish 2020, I think. So it's not even 2021 that's the only time it's been crazy. Yeah, so it's it's an interesting reality check, isn't it? That quite a couple of the businesses I work with sort of decided that they were going for on the basis of last year's sales, 2020, when there was lockdown and crazy growth, particularly in the UK. Very, very strong adoption of e-commerce, went up to 45% of retail at one point. Um, and it's now still around 25%, but that's a big drop, right? So they were saying, okay, we're targeting 4 million this year, and then they're actually like, we're back to targeting 2.5. So there's big reality checks going on right now. So what would you say are your learnings so far from doing this? Is it something you'd do again? If so, what would you do the same? What would you do differently?
Uh, well, I'll tell you what I would do differently is day one, I'd make sure that I have the finances just like set up correctly. I don't know taxes, but I think it was kind of a mistake to not hire an accounting professional that really knows how to set these things up. Um, there's you don't have to search too far to find someone that can do this as like a part-time. And especially a business of this size, we're doing 3 million in revenue a year. Uh, I've learned the last 2 months, how much it would have benefited us if we just started from the beginning and had it. So there's a cautionary tale. Always make your financial modeling and your accounting be a strength to your business. It'll catch up to you eventually, no matter what.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something I hear back from a lot of aggregators and brokers. Many have had many conversations with them, sometimes privately helping clients to try and sell their businesses, sometimes in public. Yeah, so that's a theme that comes back. And look, it's easy to say after the event, isn't it? Hindsight's 2020 vision. So now you know. I guess those are the lessons that stick, right? What would you do the same, or what do you think worked well that is worth bearing in mind for the future for other people listening?
Really some of the good practices of the business that I bought, like I'm so glad they had it. I think that having a sourcing agent that you trust is just the best thing you can do because, manufacturers, your incentives aren't always aligned, but having someone that speaks Chinese, that speaks their language, this is obviously since we're sourcing most of our products out of China, but having someone, close that can communicate on your behalf is going to just reduce so many headaches. So I love and totally promote sourcing agent. So it'll be the best money you spend. They're not even particularly expensive on a per unit basis, anywhere from 10, 20 cents a unit. When your wholesale costs are usually, $2 to $5, having these inspections, without that, our business would have probably failed. We would have had some products that just wouldn't have worked out. We couldn't have got on top of logistics the way that we did.
Yeah, that sounds huge. By the way, I just think that the other stuff is manageable. Eventually, not eventually, like right about now, everyone's raising their prices as you have because like consumer inflation is all over the newspapers and the financial newspapers tend to get it a little bit earlier than the really popular, I don't know, YouTube channels, Fox News, whatever. I don't really have a good sense of what that is because I try not to consume normal news in the UK because it just winds me up. And but sooner or later, the average consumer is going to go, oh, prices are going up, and therefore their expectation will be that prices go up. So we're going to have somewhere to put it into, right? But as you say, if the sourcing's down, like if the quality is bad, if you can't trust your suppliers, it's all for nothing. So I absolutely agree with that. And I'm always like, if somebody comes to me new, like, and they say, how do I start with sourcing on Alibaba? I say, don't do that. Phone this guy or email this person. I've got 2 or 3 trusted people, one American, one Indian, former sort of British resident
Yep.
in China.
No,
That's,
totally.
and that's just the way to go, isn't it? I mean, I
Um,
absolutely agree with that.
and one thing that's I've done a lot this last year, a lot, is really leaned in to the help of virtual assistants from one country in particular that I've got like about 10 people like across my different businesses from the Philippines. I love their attitude. Uh, they they're very culturally aligned with the West. They speak the ones that I talk with. They speak English without a strong accent. Um, and I was just on a meeting with like 4 or 5 of them, and it's great. We've sent them T-shirts, but the work that they do for us is you know, it's really good. It's high quality work. And I mean, the reason that we're working with the VAs is in Philippines, $3, $4 an hour is for some people life-changing money. That is a really comfortable salary for them. And then, I'm able to get more eyes and more, hand off a lot of operations to others, and it's been a very good relationship. And you can get different skill sets. I have 2 software developers. I've got a web flow, a marketing site developer. If I were to go deep into any other type of business, I would have to consider what they do. So that's another thing that I've learned a lot this last year to keep everything going smoothly.
Nice. And by the way, yeah, I'm absolutely on the same page as you. Literally this morning, I was interviewing one VA with my VA who's leaving, sadly, helping me to interview. And there's like early, conscientious, well prepared, very experienced, thoughtful responses, respectful. I mean, just like all the things you'd want in an employer. I have had very, very good experiences in the Philippines. Again, for like $3 to $4 an hour range, it's amazing the quality you can get. So absolutely with you on that. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of people have that experience if they do it the right way, of course.
I mean, and don't be scared to pay a little bit more. I've got some software developers. I pay, well above that, but still half the rate from the US. And these guys are smarter than me. I've been actually all these businesses that I've been talking about, like the reselling business and private label. My role is actually a software developer, kind of bringing in the data and the technology into the right places. And I don't think I'm a dumb person. And when I got 2 software developers out of the Philippines, and when they're smarter than me, like, I'm very impressed. I'm continuously impressed by some of their skill. Um, and we could spend an entire conversation just on them, how to do this and how to grow with it. But
That's a date that there's definitely should do that. But I promised we sort of promised each other and then promised the audience
yeah,
to keep it brief. So
yeah,
that's one to be continued because I love that subject. There's so much to dig into there, and I feel like I'm developing and trying to be a better manager. And there's quite an art to that actually. There's a lot. We often
yeah,
start off a lot worse manager than you would expect of yourself. Like I would say I was like a grade E manager before. I'm now going up to sort
yeah.
of C plus B minus, maybe on a good day. So yeah, to be continued. But then I guess the obvious next question is you're trying to work on scaling or managing the business. What's next for you? Are you planning an exit to sell it or is there no plan for
Yeah.
that? You're just going to buy and hold?
Um, there's a lot of reasons why, but one is like about a year ago, about the same time that I bought a private label business, I actually launched a software tool for Amazon sellers called Smart Scout. And I've been focusing on that. It's had pretty good growth. I mean, I do get Amazon sellers that tell me this is the #1 tool that they use, and like I'm leaning into that. And so I've got to clear off. I've got a lot of money invested in these businesses. So, my reasons are pretty clear that it's kind of, I want to unlock some of that to be able to invest into my software business. So yeah, selling both at the same time. Decisions were made, a few months apart, but it's kind of coming down at the same time. We went to market with our private label business last week. We are using a broker on that, and then went to market with our reselling business actually about 5 months ago, and just recently received an offer from someone. So yeah, the reselling business is a little bit more tricky, but we've actually achieved scale. We have about 70, 80 employees, and finally found a fit for someone that wants to take it over.
Yeah, that's always the thing, isn't it? There's always going to be a message to market or product to market match. And it's funny to think about an entire business as a product, but you've got to get your head. I think it's so educational
Yeah.
for us to get our heads out of operational focus, which all of us have, and stand back 100,000 feet and go, right, this is a thing. There is a market for it. Some people will want characteristics of it. Some people will hate that. Who is the person for that? And it's a bit like selling real estate or something, I guess, right? It's one man's meat is another man's poison, as we say here. So, but it's interesting that you've managed to sell a reselling business, because they are famously a bit tricky to sell, and that's what we're going to plunge into the next episode. So, just want to say quickly, first of all, really some fascinating sort of teasers for really deep dive conversations anyone could have. Really, really interesting stuff there, Scott. And congratulations on some amazing achievements in a short space of time.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
what services do you guys offer? You mentioned Smart Scout. Tell us a tiny bit more about what that is and what it
Yeah.
does.
Smart Scout is probably in the same category as like a Helium 10, but we actually don't have any of the same features. We kind of do a very top-down approach to Amazon analysis. So that is, we look at brands, we look at sellers and analyze them. We don't look at like products. Yeah, you can actually drill down and see like what the products are doing, but we focus more on the top level thing. And so, we show market share in the subcategories. We take all the categories on Amazon, which there's probably about 40,000 subcategories, and then show a market share across brands. And that gives you a perspective. Actually, a lot of times it's very inspiring. You're like, oh my goodness, there's only 3 players in this, which is usually a good thing. When you see a few main players, you see an opportunity. We actually, about 2 weeks ago, did a case study with our university here in town, where we had about 10 teams. They had to justify, they had to launch a brand, an Amazon brand, and they used Smart Scout data to justify, to show the market opportunities. And it was like, there's about 10 presentations, about 4 of them, I'd invest in those businesses. I was like, oh my goodness, like, what they were able to figure out. So there's also a few other tools that, like, my private label business, someone's asking me like, hey Scott, how can we model this product with an FBA calculator that helps you avoid FBA fees? And so we just built that into Smart Scout. And then so really it's like all of the ideas that I'm hearing that there isn't a tool for in the marketplace, we're just starting with that and building that. It is a tool that actually, because it does all the seller analysis, pretty much every Amazon aggregator out there is using it. We've been really fortunate to connect with them, really show off sellers and estimate revenues, and they really dive into the tool. One thing that really captures people's attention and imaginations, we actually built out a seller map. We have one in the UK, we have one in the US, where you could laser into, say, New York City, and then the dots just like fly off the charts. Like there's dots for every single seller, where they're located, and then you click on that and we show you what brands they're selling and what their estimate revenue is. So it's got a lot of different use cases. Some of them would fit more of the reseller model. Some of them fit more of like a private label model, but usually when people, uh, a few sparks hit, and we get a few wow moments from anyone that's like considers themselves an Amazon professional.
Very cool. Yeah, I've had to play with it myself. I haven't really had a chance to deep dive, but I really like the map thing. I mean, there is such a thing as geography, and I think there is such a thing as face-to-face meetings. It's not all online. I mean, if nothing else, COVID sort of flipped that conversation where everyone went, "Oh, you want to give up your day job, for our work week style and be a digital nomad." When everyone became a digital, well, not exactly nomad, but digital stuck at home, everyone was like, "Ah, I want to go back to the office." So there is value, I think, in knowing physical location and making those deeper connections, particularly if you're going to be reselling hundreds of thousands of dollars of somebody's product or something. So that makes total sense to me. One other thing I'm just going to tease very quickly because we're well over 20 minutes because there's so much to say and it's hard to compress so much wisdom from you. But you and I've been chatting about, well, talking quite seriously, I guess, about this conference that you are putting
Yeah.
together. So let's tease that a bit. What's going on with
Yeah.
that?
Real quick, there is so many events happening in the US right now. My team's a little bit, exhausted with all the traveling, but the biggest one is actually Prosper. And it's a very professional trade show. It's good education matched with like, professional Amazon sellers and brands. And, but there isn't that isn't there in Europe yet. And so we've had a crazy idea to like make it happen. I've talked with probably about 20 service providers already, and they love it. They want to be able to, go global and actually, help sellers in Europe and kind of unify that marketplace. So we're in the early stages of putting together a trade show slash conference slash networking event in Europe. And, anytime I show this and I talk to people, they're like, yes, we want this. We want to be able to show this off. So, and I actually, started talking with Michael the 2 or 3 weeks ago, just to like, hey, get some ideas, like, hey, if this would this work? And there is a need for that. There's so many, a lot of it's just like bringing technology to European sellers that maybe they haven't adopted some of the latest and most cutting edge technologies, and just bringing it to your doorstep is reason alone to attend one of these. So you can like do like 30 demos in like 2 or 3 hours. Really see all the tech to scale a business. So a lot of reasons. And, I'm involved with the community, and I think this could be something special. So stay tuned on that. And yeah.
Excellent. Well, we'll certainly keep the audience posted about that. Yeah, I was excited when you mentioned this because I think there is a need for something that's focused. How can I put this? For the more established sellers and the more focused sellers out there. There are other events that I've even attended. Shall we say that have an awful lot of people that are just, I suppose you call them tire kickers in the sort of old school car sales terminology, right? That they're not ever going to do anything, and that's fine. And nothing against those people, but there is a need for a place where serious sellers can congregate, and as you say, get the cutting edge technology. Although your idea of a good time, like 30 demos in 3 hours, sounds like a brain melting experience to me. But I guess you, as a tech developer, you have more
Well,
of an appetite for these things than I do.
yeah, no, not full scale demos, but just be able to like walk and see what's out there.
Yeah.
There are there's a dozen PPC bid optimizers. Well, it'd be nice to see a few of them, back to back. And so if you're making that decision, it's an informed decision.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, you can really sort of audition software in a very back-to-back sort of way that's otherwise kind of going to scramble your brain if you do it online, if there's a person there
Yeah.
to talk to. Yeah, I like that. Makes sense. Wow, sounds intense but fun. So we're going to leave it there for this episode. So Scott, thank you so much for coming to talk about
Thank you.
scaling and and yeah, buying, scaling, and then selling again a private label business. Quite sort of all human life in one sort of quick arc, really. So that's really exciting story, and looking forward to hearing about scaling an Amazon reseller business as well. But for now, many thanks for coming on the show. Okay, that's us out. You good to keep plowing on?
Yeah.
Excellent, amazing. Let's do this. Ladles and jelly spoons, boys and girls, welcome back to the 10K Collective podcast, the place to be for 6, 7, 8-figure Amazon private label and custom product sellers. Today, we're talking to Scott Needham, overachiever of many things at Amazon, amongst which is creating, scaling, and now in the process of selling an 80-employee Amazon reseller business. Not a casual matter. So, Scott, welcome back to the show, and thanks so much for coming on.
Hey, yeah, thank you. Thanks. It's great to be here.
So reselling businesses are famously hard to scale and they're famously hard to exit. So why did you decide to scale a reseller business in the first place? What was your thinking behind that?
Yeah, the key part of scaling the business was actually just technology to do most of the decisions for us. So I started in 2013, joined a brother who already had, ambitious, had, a few $1 million in sales, but had a lot of problems about scaling. So I came in and built a lot of software to automate this process. And that really made growing from, 4 or 5 employees to like 20 to 30 employees not that challenging, so that probably was the key differentiator, is building software tools for the different activities that we were doing, whether that's shipping, order automation, and all that. And it took years to do. This wasn't, an overnight success. We had big decisions to make, and we've made pricing mistakes over, and like we could talk forever about why I'd be like, this is really not super easy. But the one thing about a reselling business is it's the fastest way to grow in revenue pretty quickly. You could be launching next week, and if you are buying with the correct fundamentals, you're making money on generally branded products. And I mean, that's the business model many know, but it has different challenges that I'm sure we'll uncover.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the main thing I would say is if you want to scale fast, I had the most extreme and kind of comic tragedy version of this that I experienced is somebody came to me for private level coaching, having, I think, gone from a couple of $1 million of personal net worth to under $1 million by trading on the foreign exchange markets in an uncontrolled way, which was kind of really kind of shocking, but kind of I don't know, entrepreneurial thinking and risk taking gone wrong. But he basically, by the end of the conversation, said, "So what is really important to you?" He said, "No, cash now." I'm like, totally get you, cannot help you, because private label is absolutely the opposite of that. It's going to take you a year to get launched probably, and then after that it's going to take money off you for a while before it stabilizes, assuming it works. So I was absolutely straight up about it. I said, look, I can put you in touch with some good retail arbitrage teachers. That is what you need as far as I'm concerned. Or there are multiple other models that might hit it, merch by Amazon, whatever it is. So yeah, you're absolutely right on that. And I bang the drum for that difference despite being a private label sort of specialist, because I try to turn people away who I don't think are in a place to exploit private label, and for whom reselling makes sense. The other question though is, I guess, were you scaling? So getting started with selling, famously much more straightforward. Scaling though is tricky. Was it that you just happened to be in that business model already, and that's why you scaled that, or were there particular things that even at the scaling stage you thought reselling had pros for you?
Well, my brother started actually out of a family business, which had, a lot of we had a lot of it's like, kind of like a department store, which had a lot of relationships with suppliers. So that's really what started, is we took some of these suppliers that we were bringing into our storefront, brick and mortar, and started selling them online. And that was step one. And having success, really, growing in revenue, growing in inventory size for about 2 years before I even had joined. So I joined something an operation that already, had the fundamentals down. And I was just there to make everyone's job a little bit easier by, programming away like these spreadsheets so that things get done uh, for you. So that's like the beginnings. Is it kind of was a family business to start out.
Yeah, and quite a few people start in that way as well. There are two or three businesses in masterminds that are that kind of thing. Some which starting for sort of brick and mortar origins, and some still have sort of connections in that world, and some not. So, couple of sort of there are so many questions I could ask. Let me just throw a few sort of couple of juicy ones out there. What are the best things that you did to scale the business? What worked best in that situation?
Let's see. Best things, turning processes that really did take 20 hours to take 5 minutes. You know, making a purchase order that is intelligent, that has the right amount of inventory, and you're ensuring you're only buying on profitable products. Um, that was the biggest unlock, at least from the manager's standpoint. But then, even our distribution, they're all using our custom software, and to actually just to assist them getting in products into Amazon. So we I can actually comfortably say every employee that we have of all 80, they spend most of their time using our software to help, move our business along. Yeah. So those were the things that grew. There's one feature that um, helped us scan catalogs really quickly. I know there's tools that do this out there. I'm actually trying to build this into Smart Scout right now. So maybe if you're listening to this a little bit delayed, like we already have it, but where you could scan, say 1,000 UPCs from a supplier and see, okay, which ones of these are opportunities? Well, we built that internally in 2013, like years ago. So we've been able to leverage these relationships quickly. Be like, okay, of your 1,000 products, here's the 20 that we want to buy on right now because we see a competitive opportunity.
Yeah, and it strikes me that so much of Amazon selling, or just business life in general, but certainly with physical products, because you have hard costs, you cannot be kind of slapdash about the idea that maybe this will work, maybe it won't, and you just chuck it out there. Because every time you chuck something into the wilderness, you put your money behind it, as opposed to with purely digital products, right? So, yeah, get scanning for 20 to 2% literally of stuff. That's super hard to do manually. So anything that speeds that up. And also, I've got to say, like the pedigree that you have as a software company for building something, if you've had it internally since 2013, that is like battle tested, right? And eight
Yeah.
years later, it's or is it even? Yeah, it's 8 years later. That's like
Yeah.
super tested, right?
Oh, no, there's some ways that like, yeah, we've been around the block, but I still find one or two things I'm like, oh, I wish I would have done that like 6 years ago. So it's not perfect, but it's been running smoothly for a while.
Okay, so that's the upside now. Being the cynical Brit, or not cynical but skeptical Brit, like, and
Yes.
I've got to ask the questions of like what things have gone wrong, or what things would you do differently if you had to do them again. And I guess we're looking over quite a long time scale, so there might be quite a few things, but let's pick a couple of things that will be hopefully light bulb moments for the audience.
Okay. Um, there's there's a lot I do differently. One, um, this is a skill that I didn't have. I think I'm kind of building it right now as I'm building out my software business, Smart Scout. But one of the biggest weaknesses of BuyBoxer is we were not persuasive enough with brands, specifically the big brands. I would have invested more in our website to really convey like a degree of professionalism that um, that would be needed to like convince a brand that sells 20 million a year to work with us. Because I do think our business development team, building out these relationships, we did get some wins. We have exclusives with several brands, but not enough, and not enough of the bigger ones, the ones that see, like, because there's a few companies that have done this successfully, and I'm sitting here jealous from the outside. I'm like, oh, we could have done that. We were before them. Pattern here in the U.S., they're strictly an Amazon brand seller. They don't have private label or whatever, but like we were around before them, but they have these relationships that have really helped them snowball. And they just raised $200 million. So, they are showing they're showing the investors that they've got a good. And I think we could have built them. So there's one thing I would have done differently. It'd be to be very professional and to win over these conversations. I think a weakness that one of the reasons we didn't, I think we complicated it too much. I think we complicated the sales process with brands and just have a very clear message that, like, as a reseller, you want to be providing value to a brand, and don't get too much into the details of Amazon. You're just going to confuse them, because Amazon can get really confusing really fast. So that's one big mistake that I would probably rethink a little bit differently. Shoot, how long do we have? I could talk about mistakes all day long.
Maybe that's really, by the way, there's some great learnings from that way. Maybe
Yeah.
one more.
And I'm not to distract. I actually do think people are still growing and succeeding in wholesale today in the reselling. The second one is just to be, we actually lost money in 2018. We probably weren't operating on the margins that we thought we were. So our inventory count and our margins just weren't quite there. But I'll give a very okay, here's how we grew our margins from 14%, which I thought was like as good as we could do, to 21%. And if you do the math, that's a 50% growth in margin. So reselling, it usually does operate at a lower margin than, say, private label. But the way that we grew it is actually just the way that we tweaked our repricer. So a lot of resellers use a repricer to win the buy box on Amazon. And what really made the difference is most resellers, your product sells in the first 90 days because you're buying on products that move quickly. But we found that like a repricer would sometimes just be too aggressive. And what we were able to do is when we just started with a product, say it just got restocked, we would actually not sell under like 17% gross margin. So we would send our repricer we'd float our price up. And sometimes we'd still get the sale because we're FBA, because we have a good track record. We would get the sale even though there are people that are cheaper than us. So once we implemented that repricer to float our prices higher, it really grew our gross margins. If a product doesn't sell, we do gradually decrease that. But the first 30 days, yes, you should be trying to sell as high as you can. And then as a reseller, when products start to stock out, when you're like getting really, really low on supply, we automated pricing back up again. And this again, grew our gross margins. So I think, earlier on, if I would have invested a little bit more time, a little bit more thought into our repricer and be more creative in the ways to price up, to really push it, that'll do really well, because we have a lot of costs. We have a lot of labor. We have, do not underthink a repricer. If you're using a repricer, you should figure out ways that you can price up and still get enough sales.
Yeah, and again, to the conversation we were having in the previous episode, you were, referencing the fact that you're putting prices up because your cost prices have gone up. But actually, even if your cost prices don't go up, with your gross margin may maintain. But if you're growing a team, your overhead's getting bigger. So you need more gross margin just to support it, right? So I presume that margins, meaning like 14% going up to 21%, was gross margin. So before overheads, yes. I'm guessing. Yeah. So obviously it works on quite different sort of margin type, just industry standards than to private label. And so that's even more critical, because a 14% of turnover as a overhead wouldn't be unusual. So therefore, it would be not surprising that you might end up with a loss. But that's a massive increase in the gross margin, by the way. I think gross margin rather than revenue is like the number one indicator for health of a business, isn't it? And a lot of CPAs say that to me, and that's a number that I take a lot more seriously than revenue. They say, turnover is vanity, profit sanity, and like that's not just a saying. I think that's like a dog is for life, not just for Christmas. So you mentioned Smart Scout a couple of times. We ought to just wrap up with you mentioning, what Smart Scout can do for
Yeah.
resellers. We talked
So,
about private label. What about for resellers?
I built it for resellers. Yeah, I mean, we were talking earlier on the previous episode about it has some use cases for private label. We're building more, but like resellers are at its core what it's for, because we take the tens of thousands of brands on Amazon and just give all of that data in like a grid. You could search it all at once and you could filter out. So the number one use case for Smart Scout is you go to the toy category, you have all the brands and toys, and we're showing you estimate revenue on every single toy brand. And then you can filter down to brands that really meet a criteria that you want. They'll be very specific, the criteria. We are tracking a brand's Amazon in stock rate. That is how often Amazon is on stock with a brand. So we can filter out, because you don't want to resell against Amazon. It's just, that's a great way to lose margin. So we can filter out those brands, and then we could actually filter out brands that are selling directly themselves. Again, those are conversations that might just end up dead, because of the 10,000 brands that are in the toy category, we help you find the 500 brands that are going to be most attractive to you as a reseller. They've got good revenue, they're not super competitive, and they're most likely going to say yes to you. And I get people that reach out to me and they're like, thank you, Smart Scout, you helped me close this brand. I would have never found them. So that is that's really why and how I built the tool. And our first features was all about, that there's a lot of room for arbitragers. Say you do want to go on a competitive brand like Lego. Well, we show Lego in great detail and show you the products that are less competitive that are still doing revenue. And so, we have a lot of arbitragers that, find a product and it only takes one product to justify paying for a tool like this. So that is what I've been spending more of my time doing. It's kind of like what I got more of a passion for is building tech. And so we're in the process of, selling, cashing out of our Amazon business and focusing in on Smart Scout. There's more features in Smart Scout, but it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the easiest way to go and check that out was we'll put a redirect, amazingfba.com/Smart Scout. I don't know if you guys can offer, we ought to offer the obligatory, 10% off or whatever it is. Is there anything that you can offer? We didn't even discuss this before the show. That's like how amateur I've been.
Yeah. Smart Podcast 15. That is a coupon code that'll get you 15% off.
Amazing.
That works specifically because we're on a podcast right now, so I can track you okay, how great are our podcasts?
Yeah, fantastic. So you just go to get yourself over to Smart Scout and put in Smart Podcast 15 coupon code. May as well it's obviously a fantastic tool. May as well shave a little bit off our own costs and up those margins as well. Well, look, Scott, this has been a whistle-stop tour through some really big picture stuff at a lightning speed. And thank you for playing along. You've been a good sport, because obviously, asking people what their favorite mistakes they made over the last 10 years of their life's work is kind of a strange question, but also hopefully really educational for the listeners. So I know you've got a podcast as well. If people want to check you out there, where do they go for that?
Yeah, it's the humbly named Smartest Amazon Seller podcast.
Yeah,
And
I remember coming across that frankly and saying, yeah, smartest Amazon seller. This is for somebody totally humble out there.
yeah,
It
yeah,
is an
yeah. No,
entertaining name.
it's funny. It's kind of just like a challenge. I did want to do a podcast that wasn't like hand holding beginners. Wanted to talk to those. And I think I generally start saying like the goal of the podcast is to turn you into the smartest Amazon seller. Um, I, I I talk with a lot of, and it's probably similar to what you've got. I talk a lot about my software development and the data that I work with, and how I think about Amazon. But I've come across some amazing professionals that I ask questions to as well.
Yeah, cool. Yes, it sounds like we're after the same sort of people. I mean, Amazing FBA is a bit of a broader church, but we're mostly now focused with the 10K Collective podcast, which is most of the content now
Yep.
on exactly that. Like you're not hand-holding for beginners. Nothing wrong with that, but there's a lot of content out there that does that already, right? So this is more, you're definitely a man for the cutting edge, which is a phrase that you love. And obviously, getting back to your passion, I guess it sounds like it's always been what you brought to the table, really. It was internal when you did software development internally to the business that your brother brought you into, and now you're doing it for other people. But that seems extremely consistent to me. So obviously decades, well, close to a decade of experience with that now, and some amazing lessons that you're going to be bringing in the form of baked in lessons baked into a software. I always think that a SaaS is really a reflection of the founder's philosophy almost. So smart stuff. Well, amazing. I'm going to go and lie down and kind of take on board all the amazing wisdom that I've got from you today. Just remains for me to say thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing so much interesting thought, wisdom in one go.
Okay. Thank you.
And that's the podcast finished. That was the most garbled ending of a podcast that I've done for a while.
Oh,
Sorry.
I hate ending. I hate ending. I hate ending.
Yeah, I always try and kind of get a clean ending. It's so funny if you this is like irrelevant to you if you're on the live, but I mean you've probably watched enough podcasts and lives. Like one of the classic examples, it's like on the phone to their girlfriend when you're a teenager. Like you can't say goodbye, you'll say great, thank you very much. Yeah, awesome, dude. Yeah, good. Thanks. Okay. It's best to just stop. Anyway, thank you so much to those in the audience for listening to us
Yeah.
live or on a replay. And Scott, thank you so much for
Yeah.
joining us as well. It's been a
No,
lot
thank
of
you,
fun.
Michael. Yeah, and happy to return favors anytime. And look forward to working with you with our the European conference. That I think we want to raise the roof on that. Um,
Absolutely. Yes, I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be a lot of fun.
and honestly, my motivations the whole time is the relationships that we build along the way. Connecting with those people that are a little bit more influential, like yourself, and that's the value to me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the right relationships, extraordinary things can flow from them, my experience. And, I guess if you're in the wholesale sourcing business, it's all about relationships, right? So, one way or the other, it's all about who you meet. So, Scott, many, many thanks. We're going to leave the live stream there and look forward to getting you back on again as well.